Hello guys, here's Roman from the Gamepedia tier list team, and I have with me...
Hey, it's Lulu.
And we are going to be doing a video on the new banner that just released, which is about Threaten Speed. And it has 3 characters on it, Jafar, Takumi, and Shanna. And this video is going to be about how to use them, how to build them, what to use their skills for they come with, what modes they can be used in, and general advice. So let's talk first about Threaten Speed itself. Threaten Speed used to be really significant on Takumi, which I myself used before Inheritance was out. And it could make a significant difference sometimes, especially when he was on a defense team and started the turn 2 spaces away from your units and debuffed them by 5 speed. And you were having trouble doubling him because he comes with 33 neutral speed, and with the speed boon he had 36, so it was kind of difficult. If you don't finish him off immediately, Takumi was like huge trouble in defense because his Fujin Yumi hit relatively hard, and if you didn't finish him off, he could spell trouble for your units. Especially if your speed is reduced and he doubles you. And when I used him myself, my Takumi was minus speed, so Threaten Speed actually helped in some situations, but not that often. So Threaten Speed back then was situational, but sometimes useful. After skill inheritance, I have not inherited it on anything, and I don't believe it is particularly useful, especially on ranged units, because they will rarely start to turn next to their targets. So what is your guys' experience with Threaten Speed?
Now, as a Shanna user, since it's week 3 of the game, I have used Threaten Speed quite a bit since it was on her base kit. Now, it was pretty much mandatory for me to use this because she was my blue unit, and I had to deal with the red meta, especially Lucina, and I needed Threaten Speed to proc to double her. So I've made really good use of it, and it taught me to manipulate AI because I needed that to win. After SI came out, I still used Threaten Speed, but after a while, I moved on to just using buffs.
So generally, a big problem after skill inheritance with Threaten Speed is that it uses up a C slot that you could otherwise use for more important skills like buffs to your own units or the more recent ploys like Panic Ploy. And that is why we barely inherit it. So this is not a reason for us to pull this banner. But let's talk about the units now. Let's talk about Jafar. So Jafar as a unit is pretty underwhelming. There's multiple reasons for this. First of all, he has 26 neutral attack and 33 speed. 33 speed on its own is alright, but 26 attack, even if it gets a +4 attack boon, is rather underwhelming. He was designed to mitigate this by having his own unique dagger with 11 might, Deathly Dagger. And Deathly Dagger inflicts a set amount of damage after combat if he initiates. However, this is not very useful in current arena, because damaging units without killing them is pretty dangerous, especially during the enemy phase. If you're trying to just debuff and injure enemies during the enemy phase, they can just be danced, especially now with the green Azura existing. She can just warp next to the opponent with Wings of Mercy and dance that opponent and also buff him by a +12, +3 to every stat, and that is extremely dangerous. So this debuffing strategy in the current arena metagame is not only risky but also actively damaging to your strategy. He needs a lot of team support to function. He has very underwhelming enemy phase, and during player phase it is more useful to run a unit that kills enemies rather than simply debuffing or injuring them. Which means he needs another unit to finish that opponent off, and that opponent can charge his special or be in vantage range. So even during the player phase, there can be risks involved in running such a unit. He's simply too weak to compete. Most other daggers run poison daggers better than him. And that's why we don't really recommend Jafar for arena play. He can be used in other modes. He can be used for training other units because he doesn't finish opponents off reliably. But then you could also use a Azama with a Pain Staff or similar other units that rely on Pain or Poison Strike or Savage Blow. And he can maybe be used during Grand Hero battles to damage really bulky opponents, but it's not really necessary. So for skills, he comes with Life and Death, which is a highly recommendable skill on multiple units. Actually, a lot of units would like to have Life and Death. But other than that, he has Glimmer, which is not really recommendable. It is one of the least used specials for many reasons. Namely that the special increases damage dealt. Which means if you're fighting a bulky opponent, it could still barely do any additional damage. So specials like Draconic Aura, Bonfire, or Luna are much more useful practically all of the time. So Glimmer is practically useless as inheritance. Other than that, he does come with Threaten Speed, which is why he's on this banner, but you really want to focus on Life and Death. Build-wise, there's basically two builds. You run him either as a budget build with his given Deathly Daggers, but he's going to underwhelm damage-wise, except for the post-combat effect damage, which cannot be lethal. And you also just keep Life and Death on him for this situation. Or you just give him a Poison Dagger, but he will be weaker than practically most of the other dagger users, so he's not really recommendable for this role. Let's talk a little bit about which units would like to inherit Life and Death. Namely, rave weapon users, like Flyers, for example, Cordelia, Tana. They would prefer Swift Sparrow, but Life and Death is definitely not a bad option on them. There's Katria and, other Brave Weapon users. There is Abel, Roderick, Kane, like many of them could use it, although for most of them, Swift Sparrow or Fury are also very good options. Fire Sweep Lance users like the ones I just mentioned, Roderick, Cordelia, Tana, practically the same category of units. Fast units that reliably double or quad enemies make very good use of Life and Death. One unit that really performs well with Life and Death is Minerva, but she also comes with the skill already, so she does not need a Jafar for this. Other units that I can mention are archers, namely Brave Bow archers, but also Fire Sweep use Life and Death very well. Another category of units that uses Life and Death to great effect are Blade Mages. Like Nino uses it well, Tharja, Summer Elise, Linda uses it very well, Delthea. Alright, so that was Jafar. Let's move on to Takumi. Takumi was a significant metagame threat early on in the game and very desirable to pull. He was on the first banner that released with the game. Almost everybody wanted to pull for him when players realized that he had a skill called Close Counter, which allows him to counter-attack at both 1 and 2 spaces away, which means he was significantly annoying on defense. Before skill inheritance, when the game was new, you saw Takumi on a lot of defense teams, and it was difficult to fight him without losing a unit, because he also came with a strong bow, Fujin Yumi, which is 14 might, and yes, he was extremely desirable to pull. The bow is strong, but it has built-in pass 2, which at most was an annoyance on defense. When he survived a hit and it triggered and he could bypass your units and kill someone you didn't expect, but with AI manipulation or with good team building, you could easily avoid this situation. And since then, since skill inheritance came out, Takumi has significantly dropped off in importance in the metagame, because his defenses are actually not very high. He has 18 resistance and 25 defense along with 40 HP, and offensive units have gotten a lot stronger, especially Blade Tome Mages, Brave Bow Archers. Many offensive threats are just too strong for him to take defensively. So his Vantage build that was tried out early on when Inheritance came out proved to be rather ineffective. So the usage of Takumi on defense teams has dropped off a lot. And offensively, he is pretty solid, especially when you build him with a Brave Bow, but he cannot compete with more recently released archers, like Leon with his 34 attack, Innes with 33 attack, 34 speed, which is very similar to his spread, except with one more in both. And of course, Cordelia with 35 in attack and speed, and Lynn, who is mounted and faster and stronger. So let's talk about how to build him as a unit. If you want to go with a budget build, you can just keep his bow because it's still relatively effective, especially if you manage to speed buff him. For the more effective build on offense, you would rather go with a Brave Bow Plus, which you can get from a Gordon, or if you pull a 5-star Klein, you basically can give him Death Blow 3 and the Brave Bow Plus at once, if you inherit Death Blow 1 and 2 first, or a normal Brave Bow first. Life and Death is another option for Takumi, and raises his speed up to 38 at neutral, or 41 with a boon. So it's actually pretty useful for wadding enemies, meaning attacking them 4 times, particularly middling speed enemies. So it can actually come in handy a lot. So we would recommend either of the two as the optimal options for Takumi. And what's interesting on this banner is that you can pull Jafar to give Takumi Life and Death 3 without spending any feathers. Other than that, Takumi does not really have useful skills. Alright, let's move on to what you can inherit from Takumi. Of particular importance is not Threaten Speed, but rather Close Counter. There's a few units who want to use Close Counter that have a defined role in the current metagame, namely Sophia, Henry, are very useful for checking Brave Ike, or also Brave Lynn. And Close Counter helps, especially Henry, with dealing with Brave Ike. So it's a useful niche in inheriting Close Counter. Other than that, Spring Camilla can use Close Counter, especially when used on defense teams and Vantage, and it can be rather annoying and net you a lot of defense wins when people don't expect it. There's also Merrick, who uses a Close Counter Vantage build, which can surprise people when put on defense teams that use flyers, and he's going to be very hard to kill without losing a unit. Takumi, as most other archers, is particularly useful outside of Arena in Grand Hero battles or Tempest Trials, because as a Brave Bow user, he's going to take out opponents over walls and help you with your speed rating in Tempest Trials, for example. And as a Brave Bow archer, he's really good in Grand Hero battles, because there's many situations where you have to take out opponents in one round, so that they don't gang up on you, and Brave weapons are particularly effective, and Brave bows also have the added range, so they're strongly preferable, especially on the Great Hero battle map like Valters, which is full of flyers. That was Takumi. Let's move on to Lulu, who's going to be talking about Shanna.
Shanna. I can talk about her all day, but I'll try to be concise. So she is a lance flyer. She comes with high speed, solid res, but average attack. Due to her 30 base attack, she relies on specials to kill for the most part. Now, builds you can run on her, but due to her high speed, she can run Fire Sweep Lance. It's fairly effective on her. It's not as effective as, say, Cordelia or Tana. She can at least double with it to some effect. Another build you can consider on her, thanks to her solid res, is this encounter. You would use this with Slaying Lance, and you would have Luna or Icebark procs. The good thing about Shanna is with her speed is that she won't be doubled by the faster blade mages that are blue, and she can handle any red mage. The biggest hurdle for her to get over is dealing with Reinhardt. Usually cannot tank him if he's QP Moonbow or if he's buffed. So you would either need like Guard or Panic Ploy to take the buff off him, but is not very reliable. But outside of tank and Reinhardt, she does the job. So Shanna's base kit, she comes with Killer Lance, and Desperation, and Threaten Speed. Now, her base kit, I think, was pretty good when it first came out, because you just, you would engage in combat, and then after that combat, you would be in Desperation range, and you would just use that. You would become a pseudo-brave attacker after dealing with a melee unit. It's pretty effective when the game first came out, but now that the game has become more ranged focus, it's not very effective at all. It's not a good build anymore. So in order to do Shanna now, you have to rehaul in her entire kit. If you do want to do a budget build, you can just put Fury on her and reposition. Now for Inheritance, there isn't really any reason to get Killer Lance from her. What she gives at 5 stars Threaten Speed, and you don't really want to sacrifice a 5-star for Desperation when you can use a 4-star for it, unless you're desperate.
Let's actually answer the question. Should you pull on this banner? If you want a Life and Death 3, you can try pulling a Jafar for free, or if you desperately need Close Counter. But other than that, this banner is not really worth
But
pulling.
Shanna!
I hope to see you guys next time.
But wait, what were your free pulls?
Well, mine was just a Priscilla.
You know, I shouldn't have brought this up, because I don't want to talk about this.